We never got
No.
into the cool introduction.
I know, because I was binge listening to your podcast. I had
That's how we get listeners, is to get people on the show.
They
So they have
binge?
to listen. They have to listen to at least
Oh.
one episode. Just that's why we're having guests.
Well, yeah, I was like, okay, well, so how does this go? And then I was like, well, I'm interested in this topic, so I'm going to keep listening. And I had a long drive and I was by myself with the dogs. So I was like, I'll just keep listening. So, and I like the personal updates. Taylor, congrats. You got married recently.
Thank you. I did. Yeah. It feels
Exciting.
like it was a year ago already.
Wait, but then I was like, based on one of your recent episodes, I thought maybe Kevin had hair. Was that just a joke?
Well, that would have no. I haven't had hair in a while.
I know, exactly. He said something about,
Oh, it was when we met. I had hair, which is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
You
and
picked that up because
you know
were
what else it
talking about
was?
your long hair and the.
I had also caught that on one of his websites that he had a headshot with hair, and I was like, "Hey, when was this from?"
Okay, this is unrelated, but since you both know Kane Wilmot,
Another fellow bald man.
Right, except so I follow his wife on Instagram, and she, probably against his will, posts all sorts of things, including a wedding photo of theirs. And it is very jarring to see bald men. And I'm married to a bald man, so I totally embrace baldness. But to see bald men with hair. And Kane had a full wave of Ken hair. I mean, he, sort of he kind of looked like Ken in his wedding photo.
Well, what's funny is when you meet somebody and they're already bald, and then you see photos of them when they're not, and it almost doesn't connect in your mind. You're like, wait a minute.
Exactly. You're like, it's a totally different. Yeah, my husband had some hair when we met.
Yeah, I let mine go once I got married. I just, I didn't need to keep up the shenanigans. Just, just let it all go.
I do feel like mine's starting to recede a let it go, but I think I'm
let it go,
enough.
Just relax.
But I'll have enough here that I'll just
I
end up
like
with
it.
a
I like
forward,
the volume on top. Yeah,
like a bowl cut. I'll just end up. I'll push it forward eventually. I'm married
phase
too.
Of baldness.
Yeah. What are you gonna do? I'm married now.
Newly married, so you're still in the.
Yeah, you still gotta try hard a little bit.
Maintain appearances for a while here, at least a couple of years. I'm already punching above my weight, anyways. So.
Yeah,
that's how you should feel when you get married. I like it.
Yeah, can't slide too far, but yeah, it's always a weird topic when we start. It's never just a normal intro.
I know. I thought I would embrace that. Gio does that a little bit too on our podcast. I always get right and down to business.
I did an interview with Gio for iPostal One a while ago, and he was kind of talking about your guys's rapport on the podcast, and saying how he's very social and you're very business, and so you guys level each other out really well.
He asks the best questions. He gets really personal with his guests. So, I mean, Kevin had to experience this. Yeah. It can be unnerving for some people, and some people just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're zero business around here. Not super personal, except for our jokes, but super not businessy. But you are the business lady. Your whole thing is helping co-working operators run profitable businesses, which is language that I love, because that's kind of a term that some people really embrace and some people are resistant to. And yet I always see profit as permission, right? If you don't run a profitable business, you don't have a business. And so maybe, I'll give you a quick little intro and you tell me if I missed anything. So you ran a multi-location operation before, Enterspace, which is a lot like Everspaces for no particular reason, but it's a good name. And then, so you're in Palo Alto and Chicago, and then you were also the head of the GWA for a while, which is kind of around the time we met. And you were the head of Lexi for a while as well, which is a great group of of operators. Yeah. And they share insights and info, and it's a great little organization. And now you're kind of a coach, an educator, consultant. You focus on the co-working industry, the flex industry. You work with landlords that are flex curious. You work with existing operators who have teams, and you're helping upskill the community managers. You're helping with the ops and marketing. And so, maybe we could just kind of take a step back and say, what gave you the crazy idea to get into co-working in the first place with Enterspace? And then we could talk about, your transition to consulting that you do now.
Okay, cool. That was a great intro, by the way. It's very brave. Yeah, I think I've given up on doing really great intros, because Gio will also often get guests that I've never encountered before. And so It's too hard, but that was
Well, I know who
really,
you are, so that it was easy for me.
I know.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
great. So, okay, we're going way back. I think about this often because I'm sure you guys do too. It's a winding path that gets you. Like, how did I get here? Taylor's story started at the dog park with Kevin.
Yeah.
But my daughter's 13 and she actually brought up like the concept of the sliding door recently. And I was like, this is such a mind-blowing concept, especially when you get older and you look back on all the things that might have happened differently. I don't know why I've been thinking about that a lot lately and just like, how did I get here? What if I had made
all the things that had to sync up and connect
different
in order for that to
decision?
happen?
How did I end up in this weird little industry? Anyway, I have a lot of friends. This is getting a little personal. So I went to business school and I have a lot of friends who run like big companies. One of my best friends from business school is now the CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Wow.
Yeah.
That could have been you.
I know. And I'm like, what am I, no, I'm in this like little niche, like, co-working like industry. How did I get here? It's such a weird thing. But I went to business school. I did brand management for what then was Kraft Foods and is now like it's reorganized, but they owned Nabisco, Oreo, DiGiorno pizzas. They owned just a ton of different brands. So real brand marketing, general management, which I loved, and learned a lot about kind of marketing in the corporate world. I also learned that I really hated the corporate world. And I'd been at startups before, and I went to work again for a founder that I'd worked for before. And it was a really interesting, great company, but I'd always wanted to do something on my own. And I literally hired a life coach who just forced me through a process of what business was I going to start. Like,
cool.
I know it's like,
if only Taylor had done that, he wouldn't be with us today, but here he is.
Probably. And
you kind of became my de facto life coach by accident, dragging me into this world.
I did. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Misery loves company.
It's still a weird, like, how did this happen? So this was maybe 2010 and in 2011. And she was one of those people like, don't worry about the how, just do the next thing. Like she was very into that whole, like, nope, just like, what's the next step? So somehow I can't remember exactly how I found co-working. I was very passionate about the work environment, which is sort of weird now that we've been through COVID and so many people work from home. But when it used to be that you had to go to an office and you had no choice about it, but then suddenly there was this glimmer of like the consumerization of work, I was like, wow, if people had a choice, what would they pick? Because I'd experienced like the cubicles, like Kraft was like old school, suburban, cubicle, blah. Like I would go the whole day and have no idea what the weather was.
Can you imagine a less inspiring environment?
Yes. So I just was, for whatever reason, really passionate about how that killed me. And then I went to this startup and it was just a totally different vibe. And I won't spend our whole podcast talking about that. But for whatever weird reason, I just had this passion for like the environment that people work in and how much it matters. And for some people today, home is like it. And for a lot of people, it's still not, right? Like, that whole entrepreneurial, and Kevin, on the podcast, you mentioned like some co-working space when you were probably single and living in Toronto and you were just like, yeah, I'm going. And Taylor, and now you work from home, you're a dad, you're married, you got a couple of kids, and like, that just probably works for you. I know as an entrepreneur, like the whole mindset piece and the loneliness piece is still like I really connect with that. So anyway, for whatever reason, got really into it. I cannot really remember how I found co-working, but Sam Rosen, who's the founder of DeskPass, was running this tiny little space in Chicago, 2,000 feet, like maybe, I don't know. He had like this little area of open desks. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a thing. And just step by step, like hired a broker. I mean, I just made the whole thing up. And I think to fast forward to like, how did I get to today? I graduated from one of the best business schools in the country, in the world. And I always say, like, on paper, I look probably pretty qualified to like figure out how to run a business. And I made like most of the mistakes on the first location. I just made it up because there was
It's
like
normal.
nothing on the internet. And, I paid for like I took my life savings and put it into this business,
As you do.
which a space that someone else owned. And I just kind of backed into understanding the business model after making all the mistakes. And then just sort of like how life happened, we moved to the Bay Area and I opened a second location really quickly after the first, which I also think just, again, the sliding door thing, like, okay, my husband got this job offer and I ended up in a totally different market and in a space that was like perfect for co-working. And boom, it worked really well and was really profitable. And it helped me understand. I mean, there were things I learned for sure, but I just became passionate about like, okay, people need to understand this model. And I started I guess that's part of why I started the podcast. So my podcast started in 2016. Unlike yours, was not very consistent at the beginning. So it took me some time to get into and I love that you have an accountability partner, like doing it with a co-host can help you be really like more accountable.
And Taylor's also runs a content agency, so he's pretty much the backbone of this podcast.
Right.
I'm just, I'm the pretty face, and
he's the brains. I just do the legwork.
Yeah, it's good to have those two. Gio and I have that pairing on our podcast. But
wait, we won't say who the brains or who the legwork is, but we'll leave it at that between you and Gio.
no need to specify here.
We don't need to specify. As you were.
Totally. So yeah, I mean, I loved the business. I think, to your point, Kevin, about, is it a little, polarizing to talk about being profitable? I loved the business for the reason I think most people do. Like I was really passionate about the people and, people starting and people, at the time it was mostly entrepreneurs, people weren't really working from home. So I loved every piece of that, but it was so clear to me, like, well, if you're not profitable, you've just you've wasted all your life savings. And I got lucky because I started at a time where it was my life savings at the time, but it wasn't like what, it costs, let's call it, if you do, we won't say what like an IQ is investing, but if you do just like a pretty like, nice professional co-working space that has, say, at least 50% office space and then meeting rooms and open space, you might spend $150 a square foot to build that out. If you do a 10,000 square foot space, that's $1 million. Like you cannot F up the model,
Yep.
And even people in smaller markets, like it is like, if you want to make any money over, breaking even, you have to get a lot of things right. And it just became really clear to me that it looks simple, but it's not. It's really easy to screw up and get things wrong. And that's not even getting into like, Kevin, I love, you talk about brand positioning and some of the even bigger strategic things. Like I don't even get really deep into that, at least in this, startup school with anybody. It's more about the product mix and the size of the space. And like, they're just basic things like you cannot get wrong if it's going to work. And I just, became really passionate about like unless you're opening, unless you're WeWork or Regis, like these are individuals with retirement accounts making an investment and making a bet on how they want to spend their life. And I just really want people to get it right. And the rest of it, the community building and whatever you want to do with that profit is up to you, but you got to have the profit first.
Yeah, statistically, 80% of businesses fail within the first 10 years, right? And like, it's really kind of sad. A whole bunch of businesses also just, they bounce along, kind of maybe sort of making a bit of money. And my mom ran a business for a while. She was selling, when she lived on the West Coast, selling like Irish knitted sweaters and stuff with her partner. And she'd make all her money at Christmas and then would kind of break even the rest of the year. And I was like, that's a very risky model, right? Like if suddenly you have a warm winter, no one's buying, right? So, but like, that's part of what drives me too, is like, you don't want to be starting a business and then in a position where you've kind of run through your life savings or you've wasted 10 years of your life where you could have had more potential. You could have been the CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken, but here you are, running a fledgling little co-working operation. So, kudos to you for making the leap. And then how did you wind that down? Did you sell it or did you eventually just kind of, I think you came to the end of your lease and there were like, rents were going to go up, if I recall.
Frankly, I got really lucky and sliding doors and luck play a big role in life, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if
It's a good movie, by the way. Anyone who doesn't know what Jamie means, go watch the movie Sliding Doors. It's like this basically multiverse.
Watch it again.
I've seen it. It's an obscure cult classic, but it is about these different lives you could have. Maybe not, but it's like over 20 years old. So,
It is. Yes, let's not date us, but it is.
I hadn't heard of it for what
it's it was Taylor. He's Googling stuff, so just for the Taylors out there, it's a great movie.
Tab over here.
Yeah.
So the Chicago space I ended up selling, which was hard to do because it was like my baby, but I was part of Lexi, and it was another operator in Lexi really wanted to be in Chicago, and eventually they wore me down. And even that one, I learned a lot about that. I could have bought the building. Like, there are lots of business model things that I just wasn't aware of at the time. And it was hard to run at the time, running an operation across the country. And I had my daughter was 10 weeks old when I opened the first location. Isn't that nuts? I know.
That's a very American thing to say, but yeah, with the 8-week maternity leave.
Yeah. I mean, I remember saying to my husband, like, I think it's time for the nanny to start, because I was like, well, I already signed the lease and we were doing the build out. And then,
I admire you though.
American.
Kudos to you for making it happen, right? Because there's always a million excuses and reasons not to and stuff. So it's kind of like you commit to the plan and then you stick to the plan.
Yep.
Just bite off more than you can chew and then chew anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just try not to. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's great for the audience, though. I do think, it's good to talk about, and we talk about this stuff sometimes when we get together at conferences, but sort of the mindset pieces and the, some things you have to lean into when you run a business or you're trying new things. Like, you guys are leaning into like, let's start a podcast and, whatever.
Yeah, we just started it and then we thought about it after. Yeah, we don't even think about it.
Exactly. Right. You just, you bit it off and then you're figuring out how to chew through it.
The very first episode was titled, I think it was called Ready, Fire, Aim, which is basically like exactly what we're talking about, right? Sometimes you just got to go for it and then figure it out after, because otherwise you hit a little inertia and
there's every reason not to do it. Yeah, right. Every reason.
You can overthink, and I'm a total overthinker. So I sold the Chicago space, but I was already running the GWA at the time. So I had 2 co-working locations. I was the executive director of the GWA, which was a pretty major undertaking. And yes, I'm so thankful to Kane, who introduced me to Kevin, and then I must have met Taylor through Kevin.
It's a Ponzi scheme, really. Let's just get the next person in.
It's so funny. Every time I mention one of the 3 of you, and I'm like, wait, you don't know these 3 guys? Like, the 3 Canadians that are running the co-working world? How could this be?
We're just marketing it. That's all.
I was going to say, it's funny. Like, this is pretty full circle, because you were the first person to ever have me on a podcast. Like, I think the first time I ever spoke publicly at all, you invited me on, and I was like, oh my God. Are we sure? Does she really believe that I have something to say? And now we've got you on. It's so fun.
I know. Okay, so sold the Chicago space, and then I still had the Palo Alto space, which I had signed at like an optimal real estate time, 2013, which was still coming out of like that 2008 downturn. So I had gotten a really great rate on a lease, and then market rates were just through the roof every year, which was one of the things I learned from that location. Is all of a sudden I was like, oh, we have members paying whatever they were paying, on day one, and market rates are, my competitors are charging X for an office. Okay, how do we manage price increases? But so my lease was 7 years, and by the time I got to close to the renewal, my landlord was so annoyed, and I had a great relationship with him, but he was so annoyed that we were so far below market. He was just like, don't let the door, hit you in the butt on the way out. And my lease rate doubled. So, the rate that I was paying literally doubled from $35 a foot to $70 a foot. And there was no more margin. I wasn't willing to take the risk on that. And I got super lucky because my lease expired in June of 2020. And in the Bay Area, Dunsville. I mean, I didn't have a personal guarantee on the list, which is a miracle. So I probably would have been fine, but I don't know. It would have been ugly, as a lot of operators experienced during that time. But in the Bay Area in particular, I mean, it was really conservative and things were just really shut down. So that was it. And I had just, at the time, I had started the co-working startup school and was coaching people on how to open spaces, and was still in the GWA, although that was done in 2021. So I kind of took that as an opportunity to just refocus on, well, how can I help other people, kind of run the model. And that's shifting now because we're starting to work with operators more closely around executing, both launching and executing. And, a lot of the growth, and I don't know if you guys have started to see this. I mean, Taylor, you've done work with asset owners, like will come from asset owners who have space that's underperforming, or that they want to optimize. So we've started working a lot more with landlords, and they have budget. No offense to the listeners, but interest rates have gone up. The cost to open spaces has gone up. It's harder than ever, I think, to start a space. Not to
scare anybody.
Dissuade anyone.
I know, not to make anybody making money in this industry nervous, but
I don't want to scare you off, but it's capital intensive.
It's totally capital intensive. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. So one of the things you do is feasibility studies, right? To help people before they even put the money down, determine whether this might be profitable or not. Are there any main drivers of profitability that you see that you're basically like, here are the main things you need to get right, really right? And what are people typically, when they do fail, what are they typically missing? And maybe it's the same things.
The feasibility studies are difficult or not easy to do. I mean, I think, you probably do, I don't know if you get into this with some of your clients, not really.
Not much.
It's not my favorite thing to do. I will do it for landlords partly, and I'm working with one right now, and we're doing soup to nuts. He wants us to, operate the space, and we have to believe in that location first, right? Before he does. It's art and science. There has to be demand in the location. You guys were talking, I listened to most of your episode. I think I got through all of it on ads and talking about like the push pull. I'm trying to remember all the terminology you were using. Active, I always talk about like active searching versus like interrupting people. So I look a lot at like, well, what does Google demand look like? Is there other supply in the market? Like I did a feasibility study for Baton Rouge, for example, which weirdly has like no supply and no search volume. And I think the two are probably correlated to some extent. I mean, Kevin, you probably see this when you're, helping operators expand and working on their, marketing strategy and tactics. It's like, well, It's oftentimes a good sign when there's more supply in the market. And it's hard to find a market that's oversupplied. Although, I mean, I think they exist a little bit. So understanding, just making sure it's really hard to go into a market and have to educate the market on the product.
Yes.
So I'm sure you see this with clients who come to you and want, your help. Sometimes it's like, well, it's just takes a long time. And so you have to have the runway and the capital to just like eke it out until the flywheel starts to turn and people really understand what you're offering. So I think first it's, does the market understand the product? Because weirdly, I mean, so obvious to us, but I think you were so many things that, to pull from I'll do your job, Taylor. And I'll reference the other episodes, and I'm sure you'll put them in your show notes. But the flex, supply is like still like 3% in any market, and I think you used a percentage like close to that. Like in any market, a very small percentage of people are searching to begin with. So if you're in a small market, you have to be really careful that that search volume is high enough that the awareness and demand is there, which again there's no like real perfect signals. There can be some quantitative signals and some overlay. I was, there's factors that I think correlate to a strong co-working market. So we kind of run that analysis. So there's making sure that the market, knows the product, and then looking at the supply. And then I think today I'm thinking a lot about, you and I and Gio talked about this on the podcast that we did, like what's the positioning and the differentiation. I feel like we're getting into this mode where there's a lot of like generic supply. Maybe that'll be one of you wanted like some spicy hot takes.
Yeah.
And I think this is really challenging because kind of back to your question, like on paper, there's a model that pencils really well and it kind of looks like a Regis, or a Venture X, like really dense office space, meeting rooms. This was, probably like pre-2020, and then maybe just coming out of the pandemic, and we're trying to figure out like, what do people want? That unfortunately starts to look, if everybody's kind of running after that, well, now you've got a lot of supply that just looks really similar. And you guys talk about like, okay, well, how do you differentiate? Taylor, you're the content guy. Like, what's your messaging? What are you talking about, online? How do you get people to think about you differently than, what somebody else is offering? And sometimes it's, how close are you to my house? And then aesthetics and, but it's like, well, what
who else is there?
Who else is right? Which I love. That's like my favorite content marketing is I think people care a lot about who's on the inside of that box.
I agree.
Is that the place for me? And how do you communicate that? So I love that. So it's tricky. It's like, well, how do you create a profitable model that is compelling to people and doesn't feel kind of generic? Because now people are getting really complicated. They want experience and hospitality, and that's expensive. I see people, you guys are kind of in the, the LinkedIn circle, especially now, promoting the podcast. It's like, I saw a post the other day about this guy talking about this exact problem. And I didn't, sometimes I'm like, I can't spend time like responding to people on LinkedIn. I need to, make money. But I wanted to be like, yeah, well, have you pro forma that? Like, I get it, but like he's got, who's the CEO of IQ Offices. He's got a barista in his new location. He spent, X dollars a foot on his build out. But
the new location is incredible.
Totally. And he
so
knows
nice.
He can get an ROI on that. But he's very carefully sort of figured out the balance to strike for his end user who has the budget, who still wants like premium flight to quality CBD location, and they'll pay for it, right? He's just like really tight on that. I think it's hard. It's going to be really hard for the average operator in an average like suburban market to figure out how to weave all of that in. And that's what I spend my time like trying to figure that out and look for case studies and what's working. And I see, and Kevin, you probably have this too. Like I see a lot of P&Ls and I see what's working. And it's my favorite thing to get my eyeballs on a P&L for somebody who's doing something different, like heavy on events, has a liquor license, like something that's like, oh, interesting, that's doing this. Because there's so much of the like private office, basic meeting room, like that model, which frankly, like for a long time, like that was getting it right, and people were not even getting that right. And now we're like in this other sphere of like, well, you got to go beyond that. And how do you make that pencil? I think it's really hard, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting you talk about Kane. We should just bring him on. Let's call him right now and see if he can join the show. But I remember him a long time ago. Yeah, exactly. What is his phone a friend? He's the best. I think if you don't know who Kane is, he runs IQ. He's the best. But yeah, I remember a long time ago he was saying like, it can be a race to the bottom to add additional features and amenities and hospitality and community. Because basically like, okay, well, is it an arms race and who's going to stack the most things and at what cost? And really the market is only willing to bear so much. The market wants to pay what it wants to pay based on all these factors. And so how do you run that? And then that's where strategy comes in. That's where trade-offs come in. That's where deciding what you're going to optimize for and what you're not going to optimize for is so valuable, because at the end of the day, you can't have everything. There has to be inherent trade-offs somewhere along the way. So just to summarize what you said, the first thing you look for, is there a market? Are there buyers and sellers of this category? Number two, you said, is there demand existing, which I love. That's an old marketing trick, is don't create demand, just capture it, right? And I talk about this often, is if you can't stick the net in the water, I have a lot of analogies, Jamie, sidebar, we'll talk about this later. If you can't stick the net in the water and catch some fish, there's just not the right waters to be in. And so you don't want to be drumming up the fish. You want to be catching the fish. So that's demand. Supply. So what are the alternative options for you? Because everything is about supply demand tension. And one of the ways you create that tension, if there is other supply, right, other sellers, is through differentiation, which is the other thing you said. And I think that's vital. And a lot of people, the safe way is to just be like everyone else because that feels safe. And yet that's the opposite of what people want. There's no reason to drive by another co-working operator unless there's some difference worthwhile to drive by. And the last thing you said was around awareness and like, are people aware of this thing? And I think that last part is tricky because most people aren't aware. Like when people ask me what I do, I say I'm in marketing, like, okay, like what kind of companies do you work for? And I do this test. Actually, Jamie, when people ask you to describe like what you do and say, okay, who do you work with? How do you describe the industry you're in?
I'm totally cheating because I heard the podcast.
Shoot. You are cheating.
I mean,
okay.
I'm deep into this podcast
she scooped
at
you.
this point, guys. I do the same thing.
This is the first time someone has said that. So,
Yeah, I say like we work, but not we work. The independent
Yes.
operators who do what, they do on a boutique level.
Sure.
That's,
So you kind of
what
like
I anchor on, like, well, what's their reference point that they would have seen in the media or watched on Netflix?
And a lot of people still don't know who WeWork is. So that's
Totally.
why like I kind of default to, it's like you can rent office space by the day, the week, the month, the quarter. You don't have to have a 10-year lease. And then, but like that's a convoluted way to describe what we do, right? So even in the world where people kind of, in big cities, more people know about us, but it's still an emerging market. So, you talk about this awareness thing, and I think WeWork, for all of its strengths and weaknesses, has created a lot of awareness. Which we're really benefiting from as an industry. So these are some really important factors when creating profitability in a space. You did talk a little bit about strategy and how it's not the main focus of what you do, and yet it's inherently valuable to a business once they get up and running and whatnot. How do you think about strategy? And if I were to just give you a lens, if assuming strategy is about focusing on areas that you believe will be your strength, how do you approach it? How do you help people? Do you look at the dynamic of what's going on in this market and the buyers, the sellers, and see where things are going? What's your vision for a good strategy, if you will? And what are maybe an example or two of how you approach that with the clients? Like they want a generic space which has no strategy. How do you pivot that conversation?
Yeah, I would say I probably have the opposite problem, and I wonder. You tend to work with more multi-site operators, and I am working with people who are starting fresh. And if we just, lead into the co-working startup school, which is what I've been running for the longest, it's priced at a point where I get a lot of people who have an idea and want to, pursue this thing. And it's often they have a pain point they want to solve. And so they already have like a pretty specific vision of what they want to create. And actually, oftentimes it's not that generic. The generic version is probably a little more on the landlord side, right? Like, how do you help them think about, like, they don't come to it with sort of their own personal why. So I get a lot of folks who care about childcare and co-working or fitness and co-working, like things that is almost the exact opposite of maybe what you might think, which is like, okay, this is what you want. And I think about the ideal, we start our process with who's your ideal customer avatar. And sometimes I have to help them back off of like, well, this is what you think you would buy. But back to the point of like, okay, well, what's the market for that? And the childcare and co-working, I mean, this is a hot take, is super challenging. It's almost impossible to make that model work. And it's also almost impossible to talk a mom with a 2-year-old out of this idea. Or like a 1 to 2-year-old where mom is like sick of being at home, wants to get back into like the career, doesn't want to work at home, but doesn't have childcare. The kid's not in preschool yet. They haven't gotten to like, oh, that's how that problem gets solved, like right around the corner. And if your kid's not in preschool, well, you're going to get judged. And that's like, it's like what people do. I know, Taylor, if you ever have kids, this is what you have to look forward to.
I make mental notes on all the kid stuff.
It's like, I can't.
You will still be judged.
Hard to talk people out of thinking every mom wants this and has the disposable income to pay for it. And like, that's a real, so, I mean, I think, I don't know if I'm totally answering your question, but back to sort of the demand piece, it's like, well, if you're going to not go generic and you're going to lean into something, you really have to make sure there's a market that will pay for it. And that this is, the other challenge with this is that it's, office space might be a need, but the rest of it is really like a want. And we're talking people into spending disposable income on something that is not required because lots of people can work from home. So we're selling, I mean, except for the people who really need it. Maybe they see clients, maybe, there's some reason they need it. They have a team and that's just how it works. But more and more, this is like a discretionary spend, which is not to like bum anybody out who sells into this industry, but
I think it's important that you're advocating, you're helping them avoid that.
You got to really think about like, well, somebody's spending money on this, and it's either it's coming out of the business account or is it coming out of the household account, and how does that decision get made? So there's that, or I have a group who's super, I won't, go into like the details, they're opening, but very into fitness and kind of wanted to really go hard on like, what's the equipment in the meeting rooms and in the open space. And it's like, okay, you are like in the top, like 3% of people who are into fitness. Like that's not a market. There's no one else, in that town who's like you and cares that much. So you got to back away off and still, keep your why, but what is the model that people are paying for, but you can overlay your passion. Sorry, you asked me about strategy and I kind of went into like, well, I get a lot of people who have like a specific idea and it's like, well, how can we think strategically and overlay like what you want out of the business? And that's one of the things I do, like with the individual operators. I think sort of one of the challenges is like, okay, well, what are your lifestyle goals and your financial goals? And then how does that fit within like the market and what's happening in the market? And it's harder to do with individuals because they usually have some sort of like passion. If it's a bigger operator, a landlord, they're much more like maybe blank slate, like, okay, tell me what's working. And I think the sort of strategic advantage, I think this is strategic. It might be sort of tactical, but it's any operator who has an existing location that's been around like since pre-2020, it's got a certain layout and it might have been working really well. It's very hard to change it's expensive to change the physical layout, right? And you have members, and so doing construction, et cetera. And the demand for things like training rooms, offsite space, like, some of those things that like really operators wouldn't take a risk on before the pandemic is much higher. So I find like, again, from a strategic sort of product mix perspective, that inventory doesn't exist in a lot of markets because only the new supply is going to have that. So only the new operators, and it's harder to start new spaces. So I encourage, newer operators to lean into that even as a differentiator, because it's going to take the market a while to catch up to that, the ability to supply that type of product. Anyway, I don't know if I answered exactly your strategy.
Well, I think you're kind of giving people a bit of a warning, right? You're like, it's good to think about differentiation, but be careful about, scratching your own itch, especially if you're kind of, because, these are if you're childcare, like that's a kind of a 2 to 3, maybe 5 year window, depending on how many maybe kids you have. And then what? And then are people willing to spend that money? Or if you're deep into sports, like that's cool. You can still create an energy or an identity that's like, includes lifestyle and includes a thing, but be careful about becoming, I think there is a successful example of, the golf integration with office space, right? Like, so for every like risk and warning, there are exceptions that do quite well. I forget, for some reason I'm blanking on their name.
It's Josh Kaplan, and I love that example. It's like workspace club golf. Anyway, I'll have to find it.
You'll find it. Yeah. So but like, I think your point is like, it's good to be strategic, but be careful about going too niche or niche, because it could end up being very risky, right? Because then people change and the size of the market and whatnot. But yet there are operators, like when I think of like switch yards, right? They're like, okay, this is not staffed. This is $100 a month. There are no offices. And then there's this whole vibe and community, and their trade-off would be, I guess, through brand and through experience and through maybe scarcity and some other stuff in their strategies. But they're not like saying that they're for visual artists or for something that's super obscure, because it can be challenging. So I think it's like, your point is, it's a balance. You do want to you could carve out something that's worthy of, worthy of remark, worthy of driving past other operators, but not at the risk of pigeonholing yourself and probably being adaptable, right? Being flexible to your first bet is your first bet. But if it's not panning out, maybe think about what you want to do, to pivot.
I have another example. We had a group that Ruben was working with in Texas, and they went for attorneys. And I was like, because they are attorneys. So I was not going to actually try to talk them out of that. And I thought this might work. And it did not, mostly because they couldn't. I don't think it's that the demand is not there. They can't capture it. Like Ruben was like, I can't get people on Google searching for you know what I mean? It's just like two things that don't really combine. How do I tell you're an attorney and you're looking for workspace? Like he was just like, finally he was like, I don't think I can get this for you. And so they, had to open it back up, and they had a great product mix, great location, great aesthetics, like all the things. And they just couldn't capture that specific market they were looking for. So
yeah, perfect example. And by the way, it was Josh Kaplan owns Clubhouse Working Golf, and he's integrated golf simulators into an office environment, which I think is great and like scary, but yet golf is a huge industry and it ties well into business. And
it's also getting so much bigger. Like golf I feel like everybody is getting into golf. Like every time I turn around, people are playing golf. So it's a smart thing. It's on like the upswing.
It's no pickleball. I think we need to have pickleball co-working. And the upswing, that was good. Taylor.
Oh, there must be people working on that, or that as an amenity.
I'd never get any work done.
Wait, I have a hot take on switch yards, because I feel like every operator I talk to is like, I'm going to do switch yards.
But they can't. They've done switch yards. Don't do what do your own.
Okay,
thing.
so it's not. Kevin agrees with my hot take. Well, it doesn't make it hot.
But it's exciting. They've proven that there's something there. So maybe there's a version of that you could do, but it has to be distinct, right?
I think it's really a little secret saucy what they've done.
I find the way that they do drops so cool. Like as a person, like I have an interest in fashion, and fashion kind of pioneered the idea of a drop back in the early 2000s, and having, limited supply, leading people up to it, and, like get it while you can, and then it's gone. It's a cool, like it's scarcity. Working fashion, and now, the scarcity, but in that capacity of a drop, I think it's really cool that they've applied that to the office. Like what did it sell out in? The latest one sold out in 3 minutes or something like that.
Like 800 memberships.
It's insane.
It's totally. I am also a victim of the drops. Like you give me any fitness apparel, like new shoe. I don't know if you guys know Noble. I had to like unsubscribe from these brands.
With The Rock.
Yeah.
Because there'd be like this, floral shoe, this, I'd want to buy all of them and get very tempted. And they would sell out, and the urgency and the scarcity. I do think applying these marketing tactics to the office is so interesting from a marketing perspective. And most people, it's very hard to apply. I can't remember if I've talked to either of you about this, probably not. Because in early May, I was at an event with the woman who launches the switch yards locations. She does not think of their business as being in our business. I mean, I was like,
ouch.
What's happening? What? It was like she didn't know we existed.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, that means they're innovating correctly in their own way.
It's so interesting. Like every operator I talk to is like, I'm going to do switch yards. And they're like trying to reverse engineer this thing. And, Craig Bowdy was like, he was on my podcast and he's like, yeah, they have 68 file cabinets and 128 fake plants. Like he's just got it like
calculated.
Trying to, what are they doing? And it's every location so bespoke. And I do wonder if it's that they just are not, they don't have phone booths or meeting rooms. Like it's so impractical to work there, but they're not putting those restrictions in place. It's fascinating.
I think the reason why drops work in fashion is because the brand is cool and people want to partake in that brand. And even looking at the Switchyards website, it's not referred to as office space. It's neighborhood work club, right? It almost verges more on the what's the one in London that my wife used to go to? What's the big social club that's international?
Soho.
Soho House. Yeah, it's almost more like that. They're not marketing it just as office. They're marketing it as like a lifestyle space. So when you build a brand that's cool around a lifestyle, I think that probably helps them when it comes to, so the way they're not thinking about being in this industry, it's probably what's working. They're crafting a brand that's a little bit unique. It's more lifestyle focused. And then when it drops, people want to get involved. at a glance.
Yeah,
Maybe
although the
that's
thing I can't figure out with them, which is why like it sort of throws if I was if I was helping someone with that strategy, I'd be like, yeah, this doesn't work. They're not staffed, so they don't there's no refrigerator, there's no food and beverage. I think there's coffee, but it's like some automated machine. Like it's none of the things that you would like. It's not Soho House where you get like a bougie salad for lunch and it's a real
It's
experience.
$100 as well, right?
Yeah,
So
and it's
they,
$100. I mean, I totally,
for now,
I
yeah.
would,
When I
yeah,
said
on
Soho House, I
paper,
didn't
it
mean
doesn't
like what you get. I just meant like the kind of the vibe surrounding it, where it's
totally.
more of like a gathering place than just a
Yeah.
workplace, right? It's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
people
yeah.
go and hang out. So
Yeah,
that's kind of what I mean brand wise.
totally. But my point is like, but it's not even, doesn't even seem like it would be a compelling space to hang out in, but it is,
well, for the right person, I would say it is, right? For that younger professional, looking to get out of the office, maybe meet, network, freelancers, creative types. It's kind of like a coffee shop and a membership. And maybe it's more of the cachet of being a member in an exclusive club because there's no more capacity. And there's a lot of tension at play. Like Harvard wouldn't be Harvard and if there was 17 campuses across the US and it was easier to get into, right? So I think if you have a good model and scarcity is a part of it, you have a unique concept, you have to be careful not to try to saturate it too widely because then it becomes McDonald's and not Harvard, right? And that depends on your model though.
Yeah.
But
Harvard
it is
could have
unique
100
and distinct.
campuses and I still wouldn't get in. Probably.
That's true. That's true. Luckily they do have free classes you can watch for free. Yeah.
That's where I thrive.
You don't even have to pass the test. That's a great thing about those ones.
I'm just here because I'm interested.
Falling asleep in the back of the or in front of your computer. So let's keep on track here. So I think it's interesting what strategy is and isn't, and it really does come down to trade-offs, and it's tough. I think that's your point. There's no magic formula. The economics have to work. There's a certain amount of luck, certain amount of taste, certain amount of preference. But I think to your point, it's who's inside the space. That does create an identity. And that was kind of what you started with around, mothers and different, interest groups. It's like, what is the common thread between the people in your space and how do you build on that? And assuming that, and then you can quantify that with how does the demographics look? Is this for, this population or this, and it kind of, you can then see, is there potentially a market for this thing? But it's tricky. And you still have to be differentiated, either be super easy to get to and super inexpensive, or have some kind of experience that people are willing to travel for. Frankly, in my area, I have to travel 20 to 25 minutes to get to the nearest operator, and that's into the city, and there's nothing close, and it's the hurdle, and then have to pay for parking, and there's no on-site parking, and so the hurdle rate is so high, and it's just not worth the squeeze, right? And so, but if there was something else in a more convenient location, anyway, that's you have to find those opportunities, and that's inherently hard. So hopefully you help de-risk that.
I think that's the other, challenge about the market is, you're talking about like a 15, 20 minute max radius that people are willing to drive. It's like, no matter how desperate he is,
if
30 minutes
any
is
longer.
way too far. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's tricky. So I think that's a good. There's a few good lenses in there, but not getting too niche and whatever, and just thinking about the broader identity and what you're trying to convey and the experience you want to create. You've talked also about selling ancillary services a little bit, and you talk about virtuals and meeting rooms. How important is that to your overall profitability? And are there any kind of interesting ways you're doing either virtual or meeting room sales that have kind of worked well for you without obviously giving away all your knowledge?
Yeah, I think both are more important than ever, especially in markets, either small markets, like have a small space and you're taking time to fill up and get that flywheel going, or you're just limited in terms of the market size. And even in markets that are, maybe you're full. So, well, how do you get that margin? And Kevin, Taylor, I assume you look less at P&Ls for people, and so you're kind of like less than numbers. And Kevin, I know
he doesn't know what a P&L is. It's okay.
We're not picking.
Why do you have to air me out like this in front of our listener?
This is
Kevin,
my show.
You're a big KPI guy, and so you're measuring everything that you do. So the margin for a co-working space, if you're leasing, which is a lot of operators, 20% is fine. You're trying to beat 20%. Getting to 30 is hard. So if you're if you're just trying to do that on your physical product, and meeting room is a little bit different, that's, can be challenging. Like every dollar counts. Like that's, I think the challenge with this model is like, it just has to be really optimized because your fixed expenses, let's call it $20 a foot, outside of rent just to operate the thing, and then rent. And then any increase in revenue that you can have is really margin. So how do you get to that if you only have so many offices and you can only sell so many co-working seats? Most operators are not offering a virtual mail product. I think they just don't get it. It seems overwhelming to start. It's such a miss. Or, this is, kind of getting into marketing tech. It's like, it's not on their website, or the checkout process is really, call us. I mean, the number of operators who are still like, it's not e-commerce enabled. Like, it's just such a miss. So to me, it can be, some operators will hit 20%, and that's really incremental, right? So that's, top line revenue. There are some costs to running that program. It's either marketing fees from the referral partners, or, it takes time, but, hire a high school kid to come sort your mail. So it's not all margin, but it's pretty high margin, and it's incremental. So it's adding to the base margin that you can get out of the space, which is, doesn't have a lot of room in it because it's a physical space. And if you're in a competitive market, can you raise price? The levers that you can pull on are, there's not a lot of them. So virtual mail is one lever that you can pull to be pulling. And if you're in the middle of nowhere, I actually said no. There was a Canadian group somewhere like way outside of Banff, like think like Jasper, and I was like, yeah, I can't, maybe there's a revenue source there. So small, really out there markets, may not happen, but for most operators, there is absolutely incremental revenue to be had there. And it's, like low hanging fruit. You just have to be willing to put the work in to set it up. So I'm super passionate about that. And I think, again, you talk, about this on the podcast, and, Taylor, you too. It's not like there are a lot of like really mysterious tactics that are necessarily, that you're going to apply to this. Like, I just see most operators not running the basics as well as they could. And most operators don't come from a marketing background. And also, like, it's so hard to look at your own stuff and see it, right? I'll
Even
go
for us.
You probably do that. Yeah. And Taylor, you're like, oh my God, I look at websites all the time. Same. And I'm always like, what is happening here? Like, this user flow is nuts, or why is this on the homepage? Yeah. And the operator just will not see it that way. There's so much value for anybody listening in getting like external support, audits, et cetera. It's another set of marketing eyeballs on your site. So back to your question about like, what are my sort of, and I'm just, I'll get to meeting rooms in a second. The virtual is like, have a program, have good, better, best pricing, have it e-commerce enabled. Let's start there. And most operators don't have that. So if you just do that, then I like to get into creative things like, okay, what kind of creative packages can you come up with? Let's try to find that buyer who will buy, the sexy, expensive package. Let's get creative, but like, let's start with nailing the basics and selling them. Let's work on your SEO. Let's get the right referral partners on board. So it's just like running the basics, and most people don't do that. But meeting rooms, I think, is a little sexier and also harder. Virtual, anybody can spin that up. You don't need physical space. Meeting rooms, and I would be curious about kind of what you're seeing, but the increase, at least in like the enterprise, bigger company spend, Liquid Space was at the GWA Immersive, 600% increase since, maybe that's a 2020 number. I mean, it's giant. This is an on-demand meeting space. And a lot of that is not your 6-person meeting room. It's not your boardroom. It's like training rooms, offsites, creative space, things that feel like home, like the Mullins killing it on their living room, the Kilns putting together this like apartment product, like really creative, insight driven. What does the market want today? Which most operators like just are not thinking about, or can't change their product. And that's why I think if you are expanding, or, starting a new space, that is an area that you can play in that's harder for the existing supply to get into. And there are insights into like what people are buying. And then of course, all the dynamic pricing and, even that though, if I was to just say like, run the basics, like have really great photography. I'm trying to think of somebody else, one of you might've mentioned this, like super basic, like you have to have great photography on your site. Make sure you're looking at market pricing. Not everybody's going to do dynamic pricing, and make sure it's real. You have a great, simple way for people to transact. And I do think I did a panel at the Immersive with Flexbase.ai and Office R&D and their growth.
Yeah, I was on it with you.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was a webinar. So I did another one in person.
Oh, right.
We didn't have Office R&D on ours, which was like totally. Yeah. That panel was great for anybody who missed that, by the way, because
there's a recording.
You guys were so great. Yeah, if you're a GWA member, I think you get a recording. This was very similar, and Office R&D was on it. And I think so. You would probably have the same insights, which is like you have to make the transaction really easy for the end user. Don't make them create an account. The checkout process has to be really easy and good, and you just have to be on one of those platforms unless you've nailed the user interface on your own site, which most operators aren't equipped to do.
Yeah, I do a bit of that myself because right now those platforms are still up in the game. But a couple little quick things to add on / highlight what you said. Virtuals can sometimes pay for your OpEx. We've seen there's many cases where virtuals are actually covering a lot of the operating expenses, if not all of it, for some operators that have been in business usually for a little more
than 5 to 10 years. So very sexy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're very low revenue, high volume, steady, sticky revenue. So that's a thing just to be aware of. If you're going to be in this business for a long time, start your strategy early and have your options and whatever else. And the other point that you made about meeting rooms is about a lot of times people, when they meet, it's for a business purpose and they don't want to meet in some dingy old meeting space. So the meeting rooms that have a bit of an experience element to it, that whether it's a training room that looks really professional in an environment that's good, or it's a very boutique-y kind of high quality meeting space because they're trying to win a deal in their creative agency, or they want to look good on a podcast or whatever, those work really well. It's just hard to sell those kind of mediocre meeting room products. Those are great tips and strategies about the e-commerce and everything else. We'll ask you real quick and then we'll let you go. Just about, seeing the trends over the years and where things are headed. What's the kind of the main through line between basically where things have been going over the last decade or so that you've been doing this, and where you think they're going to continue into the future? If some, like just one mindset that someone can say, follow this line and stick along this thread and you'll be okay.
I mean, I think I'm going to keep it really simple, and I'll let you can on a separate episode say or build on it. I still think, back to our points earlier on, like Flex Office, whatever you want to call it, is still, 3% of any market, and like roughly has that awareness, in any market. We're so early. I think when you think about it every day, like we do, I get really tempted to think about like, what's the sexy thing that people should be thinking about? But the bottom line is, yes, you need a strategy, but you need the right location, the right product mix, and you need a really great website that people can transact on. And then you need the other things that like you guys overlay, like the content marketing and the right messaging and you still have to, I think we're still at a point where people are really learning how to do this model, even like at a baseline, so that it's profitable. So I think we're still really learning how to your point, a lot of operators will run this and just kind of still eke by, they're covering expenses, but they're not making that 20% margin. They're under 10, or under 20. So it's how can we still create that collective knowledge, which is what I'm passionate about, so that you get to that 20% as a baseline, and you're working on what are those opportunities to differentiate, with those, either maybe it's your first location, but you got to get all those basic things right with that first location.
Right, the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why Josh Kaplan and the golf location. It's really incredible. He managed to build out like the right number of offices with the right office sizes, and he's obviously got the right location. And he picked something differentiated that takes up the right amount of space that he can monetize. And he's doing all the right things in terms of marketing and pricing. Like, I think when he first opened, and he's run a couple of specials, but you could not be a month-to-month member because he knew people would join only for the winter when you couldn't golf outside. Like, it's like he's running on all cylinders, which you have to in order to hit that 25%, maybe 30% margin. So I think getting to that point we're still like a ways away from a lot of operators being able to do that. I would encourage, the typical operator to just like really get the basic model right, which I realize is like hard, you still have to overlay like, okay, what is that, slight, how do I avoid the drive-by? That slight differentiation, but the differentiation doesn't matter if you don't have the product mix and the pricing and the location and your website is built to convert. So I think we're still focusing on those things to start.
Yeah. Fundamentals all day long. I love it. Taylor, anything you want to add? So what we do, Jamie, by the way, in case you're wondering why I'm asking all the questions and Taylor's kind of eye candy in this one, we take turns being the kind of lead on it. And so, I'm not trying to hog all the airtime, but this is my
I get
turn
to learn a lot
interview.
too. That's the fringe benefit, the tertiary benefit of doing this. I get to just listen to cool people talk about stuff, and I get to learn along the way. Yeah. So
I feel the same way with my podcast with Gio. Sometimes I feel like I can't get a word in. We aren't that strategic about who's taking the lead, but it does tend to be, if somebody knows the guest, better, or is just, whatever, more connected to that topic. But I always feel like, I learn a lot and love to be, in the room.
Well, the reality is that we started swapping back and forth on episodes because when it was just us, we were doing outlines and coming up with the topics, and so we do two and go back and forth because it was a bit of legwork. So It was only strategic. I think probably partly out of laziness. I think we could admit that on air.
Strategic laziness is what I like to call it.
Laziness seems to have worked okay so far.
Follows function.
Yeah,
all 6 listeners do appreciate it. So now 7 with Jamie.
I know. Yeah. Now I'm committed.
And Jamie's a verified, validated listener now. She actually,
I know all stuff. Inside. I knew the WeWork reference. I haven't gotten to all of the episodes, but
keep listening. I got lots of analogies in store, so plenty of reason to go back.
We have a list, Kevin's analogy hall of fame and shame coming out pretty quickly here. There's at least 40. So
I know, but I love analogies because that's how you remember things, and it like really solidifies the concept. I was thinking I should have more analogies, actually.
I make fun of Kevin, but it really works because I'll think back on something and the analogy will pop to mind, and then I'm like,
the net. Gotta have the net.
Yeah.
Yep.
I made fun of him and it worked, and now I have to admit that he was right.
You don't have to, Taylor. It's okay.
No, I will. I'll take that on the chin.
Okay. Well, nice. I'm a loyal listener now. Thank you for having me. It was great I always love talking shop with you guys. For anybody listening, these guys are.
Well, we owe you
what they do.
All of our fame and success stems from you. You were the first one to introduce us, to get us on, on podcasts, and you helped put me on stage. And you've been amazing. You're a force in this industry. You do so much for the industry. You drive it forward. You're like a celebrity. You probably don't. I don't know if you feel like one, but you're kind of an industry celebrity. So we're really honored that you would join us on this podcast. You can learn more about Jamie, everythingcoworking.com. She honestly is the wealth of wisdom. You cannot operate a business without staying in touch with what Jamie's up to. So thanks for joining our pod. Taylor, anything else to throw in the mix there, my friend?
No, I've got nothing of value to add here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Are you guys hearing my neighbor's construction noise in the background here?
No. You should join a co-working space.
I got a co-working space. I started in 2 weeks because they're renovating the entire place.
Oh, so. I think I did hear, although my neighbor is also doing construction. At some point I heard it like a really high pitched squeaky something, and I was like, what's that?
Could have been me making a noise. I don't know.
It's
Taylor makes some bad noises too.
Your mic is probably good enough that it blocks it out. It's probably just more like really distracting.
I hope so. I've been strategically muting myself on and off the entire thing just to make sure that I don't ruin the podcast for everybody.
Actually, I just realized my mic was not really directly in front of me. I always make that mistake. Oh, well. Okay, I got to go. I have another meeting.
Yes. Thank you, Jamie.
So I could talk to you guys all day. This was really fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you. Yeah.
Okay, talk to you soon.